In the studio with us is Lee Fang, one of the most brilliant investigative reporters working in America. From the first time we met, the first time I started reading your work, I was like, this guy is star quality. And you're doing it. You hit the Les Moonves stuff, earlier in the week.
Hey, Tom, you don't need to say that, but I'm so honored to be on the show, and this is my favorite show in America. So pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Okay, Mutual Admiration Society. Lee, we've been talking about race and racism and some weird experiences that I had, and people have been calling in and telling their stories and whatnot. The Asian American experience is almost never included in discussions of race and racism in the United States, and I don't really know where to begin with that. You have any thoughts on it?
I don't know where to begin either, because it's a strange subject. Because for one thing, what do we mean by Asian American? East Asians,
people like Nikki Haley from India,
or and South Asians South Asians are separate. But then even within the East Asian category, Korean Americans, Chinese Americans like myself, a lot of these folks are very high income earning. They've got high levels of education, but compared to Southeast Asians, which might look the same, right? Folks from Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, Indonesia, a lot of those communities are very low income. They face a lot of discrimination, especially in places like Southern California and Minnesota. So what do we mean by Asian Americans? It's very complicated, and the history is very fraught. So where do we begin that conversation? I don't know, because certainly Asian Americans don't face the same type of structural discrimination challenges that African Americans face. They didn't come to the country as slaves, right? So,
although there was that period in the 1870s and 1880s that led to the Asian American Exclusion Act of 1886, as I recall,
and that is a unique experience. I mean, no other group faced that.
Yeah.
So it's complicated, and for all of these discussions, the media has kind of made race and identity. Some of the candidates, the presidential candidates, have made racial and gender identity kind of front and center in this election. So it's kind of hard to talk about these structural issues, the history, when it seems like every group has to compete against each other.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's fascinating. So, what's up in the Intercept? What are the stories that you're pursuing right now, and what are your favorite stories that you've published recently?
Well, we've done a number of stories just looking at how the media has boosted, has cultivated, has profited off of the Donald Trump candidacy. And we've got a lot of follow-ups on that. And the New York Times had a great story this week, just going to the kind of private firms that analyze media coverage and just noting that Donald Trump doesn't need to spend money on paid advertising. He's received something like $1.9 billion in free publicity from the corporate media. Right. And if you watch channels like CNN, this is, in some cases, purely positive coverage, or deferential coverage.
Yeah, I've started referring to MSNBC as the Trump network, because it's the monitor's on in the studio here, CNN over there and MSNBC right there, and it's just constant Trump, all Trump all the time.
Well, in a way, this is it's bad for our democracy that a small number of media corporations can boost a candidate, but I'm glad for the very first time, I think, in recent memory, we're at least talking about these issues. I mean, when do you see kind of mainstream activists and reporters really criticizing the way that the media is structured in this society, the ownership of the media? I mean, look at Jeff Zucker. Before he was at CNN, he was at MSNBC. He had a relationship with Trump doing, all his TV shows. I believe The Apprentice. So, there's a relationship there. And, he even Jeff Zucker was, I think, interviewed this week by Ben Smith of BuzzFeed. And, he was asked, to the credit of BuzzFeed, they really grilled Jeff Zucker and asked him, why are you being so deferential? Why all these positive interviews? Why don't you call a demagogue a demagogue? And he goes, well, we want to be fair to everyone. This is Jeff Zucker. We would never do that. And it's like, no, you wouldn't. I mean, if it was anyone else who didn't receive the same type of...
If it was David Duke, they'd be calling it for what it is.
Exactly. But Donald Trump is a ratings winner. He's now won a bunch of elections. So now he gets treated with kid gloves.
Right. Is it going to? It seems to me like the media has started to turn on him, or am I just? I mean, I've been consuming so little media over the last couple of weeks. I don't think I've in 2 weeks probably watched more than 6 hours of television in aggregate. So I may be a little out of touch. I've just been disgusted by the coverage, frankly.
I'm always out of touch in the sense that I don't watch much television. I read a lot of the transcripts, though. So I've been reading some of the transcripts, and they're just. I've got to go back and watch some of these things because I see these transcripts on Don Lemon on CNN, and of course Morning Joe on MSNBC, and it's the boosterism.
Yeah.
When Trump calls in or appears on these shows, it's just jaw dropping.
Yeah,
especially when they don't ask him about the violence at his rallies, the stories about his campaign manager. It's astonishing because if they really cared about just at least the kind of 24-hour news cycle, that would be good TV to at least ask. But they want to keep him going. They understand that there's a symbiotic relationship here, and they want to maintain this relationship all through the election. I've got a theory now, and maybe this won't turn out to be true, but if Donald Trump's campaign really did collapse in the next month or two, the corporate media has a huge incentive to at least resuscitate it because, they're riding this gravy train, and they'd like to ride it all the way through the election and maybe even until next year if he becomes president.
Yeah. Do you see any of that happening on the Democratic side? It seems like, if the media wanted to turn Hillary and Bernie into a horse race, they'd be emphasizing the fact that Bernie still has, it's a diminishing or narrowing window, but he still has a window to win the nomination. And they would be pushing that. And I've been surprised that they aren't. And my personal conspiracy theory on this has been that Bernie has been explicitly not in code. Just explicitly calling out the media, both for the consolidation and for infotainment versus news for years. And they view him as a threat, that he's calling out the disservice that they're doing to America, and they don't want to give him more airtime to do that. Look at what he did with Chuck Todd the other day. When Chuck Todd interviewed him, and Bernie kept saying, "Chuck, you need to be covering this. You guys, why don't you guys talk about this kind of stuff?" And secondly, they don't want they're concerned that their business model will be broken up if Bernie becomes president and he starts enforcing the Sherman Act again or rolls back the Telecommunications Act of '96. You could see some of these giant media conglomerates broken up, which would be arguably a really good thing for competition and democracy and news, but not a good thing for Les Moonves' stock options.
No, I think that's right. I think that's a big part of it. And then there's the other issue, and that's just the personality of Bernie Sanders. He doesn't make for necessarily the greatest TV. He talks about trade deals. He talks about inequality. He's not throwing personal insults. He's not going on TV to say the most bombastic thing possible about Hillary Clinton. He's not a buffoon. He's not a buffoon, but if you're a producer and you want to kind of create the kind of carnival that will work well in a 5-minute segment, talking about the issues faced by fast food workers, which is what Bernie Sanders talks about every day, talking about the minimum wage and talking about labor rights, versus the latest kind of vulgar insult from Donald Trump. The decision's very, very simple.
Yeah,
right?
they're talking about now John Kasich might be the nominee, Paul Ryan might be the nominee. Bernie has won more votes than all of the Republican candidates, with the exception of Donald Trump, combined, I believe. It's certainly more than any of them individually. He's won more states than any of them individually, with the exception of Donald Trump. And
it's not fair. What they're doing is not. It's fundamentally
right,
unfair.
And they're saying, well, these Republicans, Cruz is still viable, and Kasich is still viable, and maybe even Paul Ryan is viable, but Bernie, he's not viable. It seems bizarre to me.
Oh, look, and there was that study that came out in December that in the first 11 months of last year, ABC World News, I believe, covered Bernie Sanders in less than a minute. If you added all the coverage up, and I don't remember the exact number, it was like over 60 or 70 minutes for Donald Trump. Yeah. And, a very similar large number for Hillary Clinton. And you see this in kind of in snippets, right? Like in one of the fall debates, Bernie Sanders made that kind of famous comment, "I don't want to talk about the emails. I want to talk about the issues."
Right.
And then he that's what everyone covered the next day. But if you actually read the transcript or watch that debate, he's also railing against the media. He's saying the media is just ginning up fake controversies, not talking about the issues. Did the media cover that part of his speech? That part of the debate? No.
Right. Right. And that was the context in which he was saying, we're sick and tired of hearing about your damn emails.
That's right.
You know, we're sick and tired of this biased media. Amazing. Other stories at the Intercept right now that you're looking at?
Oh, we're covering a lot of stuff. We just talked to an NSA official yesterday, asking them how they would feel in terms of the safeguards for a Donald Trump presidency. So we've got a fun story coming out there.
Oh, that should be real interesting.
Talked to a large number of Democratic congressmen on Wednesday about their view on superdelegates, that so many lobbyists can be superdelegates. I mean, it's incredible that even Democrats have a less democratic system than Republicans in many respects for nominating a president and setting the party platform.
Are these, I mean, Howard Dean, for example, recently took a job as a lobbyist, and I'm always, for the pharmaceutical industry, if I remember correctly, and I'm always astonished when I see him on particularly MSNBC.
They never disclose that.
No, they never do.
To watch more clips from our programs, hit the Watch More Videos button over here. And please be sure to hit the handy-dandy subscribe button so you'll always be up to date. Tag, you're it.